How does a single dance with my ex at our wedding become the spark that burns through my marriage, my reputation, and everything I thought I could control? What began as an innocent spin on the dance floor turned into months of secrets, gossip, and public humiliation, until my husband, always so quiet, decided to answer back where everyone could see. Can I still call him the villain when the legal papers end up in my hands? The champagne bubbles tickled my throat as I watched couples swaying on the dance floor of the Grand Plaza ballroom. My wedding dress felt heavier now, 3 hours into the reception, but I couldn't stop smiling. Everything had been perfect. The ceremony, the photos, the speeches. Deacon looked so handsome in his charcoal grey suit, chatting with his teaching colleagues near the bar. "Xanthe," a familiar voice called from behind me. I turned and my heart skipped a beat. Julian Kessler stood there in a navy blue suit that fit him like it was tailored yesterday. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and that crooked smile I remembered so well spread across his face. "Julian, I can't believe you made it." I hugged him, breathing in his cologne, still the same spicy scent he'd worn when we dated 5 years ago. "Wouldn't miss seeing you get married. You look absolutely stunning." His eyes lingered on my dress, then met mine with an intensity that made me flush. "Thank you. How's the tech consulting business?" "Booming. I just closed a deal with a Fortune 500 company." He gestured toward the dance floor. "Remember when we used to dance at that little jazz club downtown? You still move like that." I laughed, feeling suddenly 17 again. "I don't know. It's been a while." "Come on. One dance for old time's sake." Julian extended his hand. I glanced toward Deacon, who was deep in conversation about standardized testing with his principal. One dance couldn't hurt. "Just one." Julian's hand was warm as he led me onto the dance floor. The band was playing The Way You Look Tonight, and suddenly his arms were around me, one hand on my waist, the other holding mine. We fell into the old rhythm immediately. He'd always been an incredible dancer. "You remember," he murmured, spinning me expertly. "Muscle memory," I whispered back, but my heart was racing. His bicep felt solid under my palm as he pulled me closer. I found myself leaning into him, my body remembering how perfectly we'd fit together. "I always wondered what would have happened if I hadn't taken that job in Seattle," Julian said softly, his breath warm against my ear. "Julian?" I started to protest, but he spun me again, and I was laughing despite myself. Other guests were watching us, smiling at what they probably thought was just a friendly dance. "You're happy, right?" he asked as he dipped me low. "Really happy?" For a split second, I hesitated. Deacon and I had been going through a rough patch lately. He'd been distant, buried in his work, coming home exhausted and barely talking. But today was supposed to be a new beginning. "Of course I'm happy, I just got married." But even as I said it, something felt hollow about the words. Julian pulled me back up, his eyes searching mine. "Good, you deserve everything beautiful in this world." The song was ending, but I didn't want to let go. His hands lingered on my waist, and I kept my palm pressed against his chest, feeling his heartbeat through the fabric of his shirt. Then I caught sight of Deacon over Julian's shoulder. He was standing by our head table, holding 2 glasses of champagne, completely still. His face was expressionless, but his eyes, I'd never seen him look at me like that before, like he was watching something die. The music stopped, and Julian stepped back. "Thank you for the dance, Mrs. Lira." "Thank you," I managed, my voice catching slightly. I smoothed down my dress and walked back toward Deacon, my heels clicking against the marble floor. "Having fun?" Deacon asked, handing me a glass. His tone was neutral, but something was different. "Just catching up with an old friend. You remember Julian from college, right?" "Right." Deacon took a sip of his champagne, his eyes distant. "Our first dance is coming up." The band leader was already making the announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, please join us for the bride and groom's first dance as husband and wife." Deacon offered me his arm, and we walked onto the dance floor as everyone gathered around. The opening notes of At Last filled the ballroom, the song we'd chosen together months ago. Deacon's hands found their proper positions, one on my waist, one holding my hand, but everything felt mechanical. "You okay?" I whispered as we began to sway. "Perfect," he said, but he wasn't looking at me. He was looking somewhere over my shoulder, his jaw tight. This wasn't how I'd imagined our first dance. In my dreams, we'd been lost in each other's eyes, oblivious to everyone watching. Instead, Deacon felt like a stranger. His hands were cold, his movements stiff. When he spun me, it was precise but passionless. "Deacon, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. It's our wedding day. Everything's perfect." But the way he said perfect made it sound like a curse. The song felt endless. I tried to smile for the cameras, tried to look like a blissful bride, but Deacon's distance was like a wall between us. When the music finally ended, he kissed my cheek, not my lips, and the applause felt hollow in my ears. "I need some air," Deacon said quietly. "Mingle with your guests. I'll be back." He walked away before I could respond, leaving me standing alone in my wedding dress while couples filled the dance floor around me. I caught my mother's concerned look from across the room and forced a bright smile. But Julian was watching too, from near the bar, and when our eyes met, he raised his glass in a small salute. I felt heat creep up my neck as I remembered how natural it had felt to be in his arms, how alive I'd felt during those 3 minutes. That night, lying in our hotel suite, I stared at the ceiling while Deacon slept beside me. He'd been polite but distant through the rest of the reception, smiling for photos, but barely touching me. Even now, on our wedding night, there was space between us in the king-size bed. I replayed both dances in my mind, the electricity with Julian, the coldness with Deacon. Had I done something wrong? It was just one dance, just nostalgia. Deacon was being oversensitive. But as I finally drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the image of Deacon's face when he'd seen me with Julian. He'd looked like he was already grieving something that hadn't even begun. I was wrong about that. It had already begun. 3 weeks after the honeymoon, our apartment felt different. The wedding gifts were still in boxes, thank you cards, half written on the kitchen counter. Deacon had thrown himself back into his teaching with an intensity that surprised me. He left early, came home late, and spent evenings grading papers or preparing lessons. "How was school today?" I'd ask over dinner. "Fine," he'd answer, not looking up from his plate. "The Hendersons want to have us over for dinner this weekend. I have parent conferences. On Saturday night, I need to prepare." Conversations became transactions, logistics about bills, schedules, household tasks. The easy intimacy we'd built over 3 years of dating had evaporated. I told myself it was just post-wedding stress, the adjustment to married life. Then Julian texted me. "Hope married life is treating you well. Coffee sometime to catch up properly." I stared at the message for 10 minutes before responding. "Sure, how about Thursday afternoon?" We met at Grind Coffee, a trendy place downtown near my marketing firm's office. Julian was already there when I arrived, looking effortlessly handsome in a charcoal sweater and jeans. He stood to hug me, and I caught that familiar scent again. "You look great," he said, studying my face. "Marriage agrees with you." "Thanks." I slid into the booth across from him. "So, tell me about this Fortune 500 deal." For an hour, we talked like old friends. He told me about his consulting work, the loft he'd bought in the arts district, his travels to tech conferences. I found myself laughing more than I had in weeks, remembering why I'd fallen for him in college. "What about you?" Julian asked. "Still loving the content marketing world?" "It has its moments. I'm working on a campaign for a sustainable fashion brand that's actually exciting." "You always were passionate about your work. I remember those late nights you'd spend perfecting presentations." "You remember that?" "I remember everything about us, Xanthe." His voice dropped lower. "Do you ever think about what might have been?" I should have shut it down right there. Should have talked about Deacon, about how happy I was, about how inappropriate this conversation was becoming. Instead, I felt a familiar flutter in my stomach. Sometimes, I admitted quietly. Julian reached across the table and covered my hand with his. I made a mistake letting you go. I should have asked you to come to Seattle with me. Julian, I know you're married, I respect that, but I had to tell you. His thumb traced across my knuckles. You were the one that got away. I pulled my hand back, but not immediately. I should go. I have a meeting. Of course, but Xanthe, I'm not going anywhere this time. I'm here to stay. That evening, Deacon was already asleep when I got home from a work dinner that had run late, or so I told him. Really, I'd sat in my car for an hour, replaying every moment with Julian, every word, every touch. I deleted our text conversation and tried to put it out of my mind, but Julian texted again the next day, and the day after that. Small things, a funny meme, a photo of a sunset, questions about my day. I found myself looking forward to his messages, crafting careful responses that were friendly, but not too friendly. Working late again, Deacon asked one Thursday evening as I grabbed my purse. Client dinner, you know how it is. Right. He didn't look up from the stack of algebra tests he was grading. Drive safe. But I wasn't going to a client dinner. I was meeting Julian at his loft to see his art collection. Or that's what I told myself. The building was all exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows. His apartment was minimalist and sophisticated, nothing like the cluttered space he'd had in college. Wine, he offered, opening a bottle of Pinot Noir. Just one glass. I can't stay long. We sat on his leather sofa, looking out at the city lights. Julian had jazz playing softly, and the whole scene felt like something from a movie. He told me about his art purchases, his travels, his plans to expand his consulting business. I told him about my frustrations at work, my dreams of starting my own agency someday. You should do it, Julian said. You're brilliant. You always were. When was the last time Deacon had called me brilliant? When was the last time he'd really listened when I talked about my ambitions? It's risky, I said. Deacon likes stability. What do you like? I met his eyes and the air between us shifted. I used to like adventure. You still do. I can see it in your eyes. Julian moved closer on the sofa. You're not happy, Xanthe. I could tell at the wedding, and I can tell now. I am happy. I'm just adjusting. To what? To being ignored? To settling for someone who doesn't appreciate what he has? You don't know, Deacon. I know you. And I know when you're lying to yourself. He was right, and we both knew it. The tension between us was electric, dangerous. When he leaned in, I should have pulled away, should have left, should have remembered my wedding vows. Instead, I let him kiss me. It was soft at first, tentative, giving me a chance to stop it. But I didn't. I kissed him back, my hand finding the back of his neck, pulling him closer. For those few moments, I felt alive in a way I hadn't since before the wedding. When we finally broke apart, I was breathing hard. I can't. I'm married. I know, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. I should go. I grabbed my purse and practically ran to the elevator, my heart pounding. In the car, I checked my reflection in the mirror. My lipstick was smudged, my hair messed. I fixed both before driving home. Deacon was in the guest room when I got back, door closed, light off. We'd been sleeping separately more often lately. He claimed I tossed and turned too much, kept him awake. I was almost relieved not to face him. But lying alone in our bed, I couldn't stop thinking about Julian's kiss, about the way he'd looked at me like I was the most fascinating woman in the world. When was the last time Deacon had looked at me like that? The next morning, Deacon was making coffee when I came into the kitchen. How was your dinner? Good, productive. The lie came easily now. What client was it again? I hesitated for just a second. The sustainable fashion brand. They want to expand the campaign. Deacon nodded, but something in his expression made me nervous. That's great. More billable hours. Exactly. I poured myself coffee, avoiding his eyes. My phone buzzed with a text. Without thinking, I glanced at it. Julian's name appeared on the screen. Last night was... I quickly flipped the phone face down, but not before Deacon saw me do it. Everything okay? He asked. Just work stuff. Boring. But Deacon was watching me with that same unreadable expression he'd had at the wedding. Like he was putting pieces together, solving an equation I didn't want him to solve. That night he slept in the guest room again, and this time I was pretty sure it had nothing to do with my tossing and turning. The gossip started small, the way it always does. A colleague at work mentioning she'd seen me at Grind Coffee with a gorgeous guy who definitely wasn't your husband. My sister Lena asking pointed questions about how married life was treating me. Aunt Orla making snide comments about young wives who didn't know how good they had it. I should have been more careful. Should have met Julian somewhere less visible, somewhere we wouldn't be seen by half the city's marketing professionals. But part of me, a part I didn't want to acknowledge, had enjoyed the thrill of being seen with him. Julian commanded attention wherever he went, and being on his arm made me feel important, desirable. People are talking, my mother said during our weekly phone call. About what? I asked, though I already knew. About you and some man. Stella Morrison saw you at that coffee place downtown, said you two looked very cozy. Stella Morrison was the biggest gossip in my mother's book club. If she'd seen us, half the neighborhood knew by now. He's just an old friend from college, Mom. We were catching up. Catching up requires holding hands across the table. My stomach dropped. We weren't. Xanthe Marie, I raised you better than this. You've been married less than 2 months. Nothing is happening. We're just friends. But even as I said it, I was thinking about our last meeting at his loft, about the way he'd kissed me, about how I'd kissed him back, about how I'd been back there twice since then, telling Deacon I was working late or meeting clients. Where there's smoke, there's fire, my mother said, and right now there's a lot of smoke. Sunday dinner at my parents' house was tense. Deacon sat quietly, making polite conversation with my father about the school district's budget cuts. Lena kept shooting me meaningful looks across the table. Aunt Orla was practically vibrating with barely contained gossip. So, Xanthe, Orla said as we cleared the dessert plates, Lena tells me you've been networking quite a bit lately. It's important to maintain professional relationships, I said carefully. Oh, absolutely, especially with handsome men from your past. Orla, my father warned. What? I'm just saying, if I were a newlywed, I'd be spending my evenings at home with my husband, not gallivanting around town. Deacon's fork clinked against his plate. Xanthe works hard. She deserves to enjoy herself. The way he said it made my skin crawl. There was something underneath his words, something sharp and knowing. Of course she does, Orla continued, but appearances matter. People talk. Let them talk, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. I'm not doing anything wrong. Of course you're not, sweetheart, my mother said quickly. We just want you to be careful. You know how people can be. But Lena was staring at me with narrowed eyes. Are you sure about that? Because Jenny Martinez saw you going into some apartment building downtown Thursday night. Said you looked pretty dressed up for a work meeting. My blood ran cold. Jenny Martinez was Lena's college roommate, now a nurse at the downtown hospital. The apartment building had to be Julian's. I don't know what she thinks she saw. She saw you, Xanthe, in that blue dress you wore to Sarah's engagement party, the one you said made you feel sexy. Deacon went very still beside me. I could feel his attention like a laser focus, even though he wasn't looking at me. It was a client dinner. Some clients live in apartments. What client? Lena pressed. I don't have to justify my professional activities to you. Professional activities? Lena laughed bitterly. Is that what we're calling it? Lena, that's enough, my father said. But the damage was done. Deacon excused himself to use the bathroom, and didn't come back for 15 minutes. When he did, his face was composed, but his eyes were distant. The drive home was silent. Deacon stared straight ahead, hands gripping the steering wheel. I tried to make conversation about dinner, about my father's new hobby of woodworking, about anything that might break the tension. He answered in monosyllables. At home, he went straight to his computer, saying he had lesson plans to work on. I tried to watch Netflix, but I couldn't concentrate. Every few minutes I heard the soft clicking of his keyboard from the spare bedroom he'd turned into an office. Around midnight, I knocked on the door. "Deacon, are you coming to bed?" "I'll be up for a while. Don't wait up." I pressed my ear to the door and heard him on the phone with someone, his voice too low to make out words. Who was he calling this late on a Sunday night? My phone buzzed with a text from Julian. "Missing you. When can I see you again?" I should have deleted it immediately. Should have blocked his number. Should have confessed everything to Deacon and begged for forgiveness. Instead, I texted back, "Tomorrow night, same place." Because the truth was, Julian's attention had become addictive. With him, I felt like the woman I'd been before marriage, before routine, before the slow death of passion that seemed to define my relationship with Deacon. Julian looked at me like I was a prize he'd won. Deacon looked at me like I was a problem he was trying to solve. The next evening, I told Deacon I had a late meeting with the sustainable fashion client again. He didn't even look up from his papers when I said it. "Drive safe," he said, the same words he always said, but this time they sounded like a warning. At Julian's loft, we opened another bottle of wine and ordered Thai food. He'd bought new art, an abstract piece that reminded him of the way I moved when I danced. Everything he said made me feel beautiful, important, desired. "I've been thinking about us," Julian said as we sat on his sofa after dinner. "Julian, I know it's complicated, but what we have is real. It always was." He was right. With Julian, everything felt easy, natural. We talked for hours about books, travel, dreams for the future. He listened when I talked about wanting to start my own agency, encouraged my ambitions, instead of worrying about stability and risk. When he kissed me this time, I didn't pull away. When his hands found the zipper of my dress, I didn't stop him. For 2 hours, I let myself forget about Deacon, about marriage, about consequences. Driving home afterward, I felt like I was living a double life. Julian's scent was still on my skin, despite the shower I'd taken at his place. My lips were swollen from his kisses. I looked like a woman who'd been thoroughly loved. Deacon was asleep when I got home, or pretending to be. I slipped into our bed quietly, but he shifted when the mattress moved. "How was your meeting?" he asked in the darkness. "Good, productive." "That's nice." His voice was flat, emotionless. "Xanthe? Yeah? I love you." The words hit me like a slap. When was the last time he'd said that? When was the last time I'd said it back? "I love you too," I whispered, but the words felt like ash in my mouth. I lay awake until dawn, listening to Deacon breathe beside me, thinking about Julian's hands on my skin, about the choice I'd made and couldn't take back. I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross, and somehow I had the feeling Deacon already knew. The photos appeared on social media first. Someone had taken them outside Grind Coffee, Julian and me walking close together, his hand on the small of my back. Another one of us getting into his car, my head thrown back in laughter at something he'd said. In the images, we looked like a couple, a happy, intimate couple. My phone started buzzing at 7 in the morning. Text after text from friends, colleagues, family members. Some were concerned, others curious, a few openly judgmental. "Girl, what is this?" from my college roommate Sarah, with screenshots attached. "Call me now," from Lena. "We need to talk," from my mother. But the worst was from my coworker Jennifer. "HR wants to see you first thing Monday. Thought you should know." I sat in bed, scrolling through the messages, my heart pounding. Deacon had already left for school. He'd been leaving earlier and earlier each week, sometimes before I even woke up. I wondered if he'd seen the photos yet, if someone had sent them to him too. At work, the whispers followed me down the hallway. Conversation stopped when I walked by. Jennifer gave me a sympathetic look as I passed her desk, but others weren't so kind. I could feel their judgment like a weight on my shoulders. The HR meeting was humiliating. Janet Kowalski, our director, sat across from me with a folder that I assumed contained printouts of the photos. "Xanthe, I'm sure you're aware why we're here. If this is about some photos, it's about our company's reputation. You're the face of our client relationships. When you're photographed in compromising positions with men who aren't your husband, it reflects poorly on all of us. I wasn't in any compromising positions. I was having coffee with a friend." Janet opened the folder and slid a photo across the desk. It was one I hadn't seen. Julian and me outside his apartment building, his arms around my waist, my hands on his chest. We were clearly about to kiss, or had just finished kissing. My mouth went dry. This is taken out of context. Is it? Because it looks pretty clear to me. Janet leaned back in her chair. "Look, I like you. You do good work, but I can't have this kind of drama affecting our professional environment. Consider this your only warning." The rest of the day was torture. I tried to focus on work, but every notification on my phone made me jump. Julian had texted several times, asking if I was okay, saying we needed to talk. I didn't respond. At lunch, I called my mother. "Have you seen them?" I asked without preamble. "Your sister showed me." "Xanthe, what were you thinking?" "I wasn't thinking. It just happened." Affairs don't just happen. They're choices, bad choices. It's not an affair. We're just... Don't lie to me. I raised you. I know what guilt looks like. My mother's voice was sharp. "That man has his hands all over you in those pictures. What do you think Deacon is going to say when he sees them?" I hadn't thought about that. Deacon, who valued his reputation, who taught high school students, who had to maintain a certain image in the community. If these photos spread to his school, his colleagues, his students' parents... "I have to fix this," I said. "Yes, you do. End it with this Julian person, tonight, and then you grovel to your husband and pray he forgives you." But when I got home that evening, Deacon wasn't there. His car was gone, and there was a note on the kitchen counter. "Having dinner with Dave. Don't wait up." Dave was his best friend from college, now a lawyer downtown. They hadn't had dinner together in months. The timing felt significant. I tried calling Deacon, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried texting, but he didn't respond. Finally, around 10 o'clock, I heard his key in the door. He came into the living room where I was pretending to watch TV, his face carefully neutral. "How was dinner with Dave?" I asked. "Enlightening." Deacon sat down in the chair across from me, not on the sofa beside me like he used to. "We talked about a lot of things: marriage, trust, legal options." My blood turned to ice. "Legal options? Dave's a family lawyer now. Did you know that? Specializes in divorce cases." "Deacon, he showed me some interesting photos tonight. Apparently, they're making the rounds on social media, you and your old friend from college." I wanted to deny it, to explain, to somehow make this better. But the look in Deacon's eyes stopped me. He knew. He'd probably known for weeks. "It's not what it looks like." "Really? Because it looks like my wife is having an affair." The word hung in the air between us like a blade. Affair. That's what this was. What I'd been refusing to call it. I never meant for this to happen. But it did happen. It is happening. Deacon leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "How long?" "Deacon, please." "How long, Xanthe?" "Since the coffee shop. A few weeks." "The coffee shop, right." He nodded slowly. "And all those late meetings, client dinners, working late." I couldn't speak, couldn't lie anymore. I trusted you, Deacon said quietly. When people started talking, when your sister called me, when Dave showed me the first photos last week, I defended you. I told them they were wrong, that my wife wouldn't do that to me. You've known for a week. I've suspected for longer than that. Since the wedding, really. The way you danced with him, the way you looked at him. Deacon stood up, pacing to the window. But I kept telling myself I was being paranoid, jealous, that I was imagining things. You weren't imagining things, I whispered. No, I wasn't. He turned back to me. So what now? Do you want a divorce? Do you want to be with him? The question caught me off guard. Did I? Julian made me feel alive, desired, important. But divorce? Breaking up our life together? I hadn't thought that far ahead. I don't know. You don't know, Deacon laughed bitterly. You're having an affair, humiliating me in front of our entire social circle, destroying your career, but you don't know what you want. I'm confused. I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. But you did hurt me. You are hurting me. Every day, every lie, every time you come home smelling like another man. I started crying then, ugly sobs that shook my whole body. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll end it. I'll never see him again. Deacon watched me cry with no expression on his face. Will you? Because you've said that before. To yourself, probably. How many times have you decided to end it and then gone back to him? He was right. I'd told myself it was over a dozen times, then found myself texting Julian, meeting him, falling back into his arms. This time will be different. No, Deacon said quietly, it won't, because you don't want it to end. You want to have both, the security of marriage and the excitement of an affair. But that's not how life works. He walked toward the hallway, then stopped. I'm sleeping in the guest room, permanently. And Xanthe, I'm done pretending this marriage is working. That night, I lay alone in our bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to Deacon move around in the guest room. I thought about calling Julian, about running to his loft and losing myself in his arms. I thought about packing a bag and leaving, starting over somewhere new. Instead, I stayed frozen in place, caught between two worlds, belonging fully to neither. I had no idea that Deacon was already 3 steps ahead of me, building a case that would destroy everything I thought I could control. Deacon became a ghost in his own home. He left before I woke up, came back after I was asleep, and on weekends, he found reasons to be elsewhere, grading papers at the library, helping his elderly neighbor with yard work, visiting his parents 2 hours away. We lived like strangers sharing space, polite but distant. The photos had died down on social media, but the damage was done. My reputation at work was permanently tarnished. Friends stopped inviting me to social events. My family was divided. My mother barely spoke to me. Lena had blocked my number, and even my father seemed disappointed whenever we talked. But Julian was constant. He texted me every day, called when he knew Deacon wouldn't be home, and made me feel like I was the center of his universe. When the rest of my world was falling apart, he was my refuge. Leave him, Julian said one evening as we lay in his bed, the city lights twinkling outside his floor-to-ceiling windows. You're miserable. He's miserable. End the charade. It's not that simple. We have a life together, a home, shared finances. Money can be sorted out. Houses can be sold. Julian traced patterns on my bare shoulder. You're wasting your life staying in a marriage that's already over. What if I'm making a mistake? What if this is just a phase? This isn't a phase, Xanthe. This is real. What we have is real. But even as he said it, I wondered if that was true. Was this love, or was it just the thrill of the forbidden? Was Julian the man I was meant to be with, or just an escape from the mundane reality of marriage? I'd been asking myself these questions for weeks, but I was no closer to answers. At home, Deacon had become methodical in a way that made me nervous. He'd always been organized, but now there was something almost clinical about his routines. He kept a notebook that he wrote in every evening, documenting something I couldn't see. He'd moved all his important papers to a filing cabinet in the guest room and changed the passwords on his personal accounts. "What are you writing in that notebook?" I asked one morning when we crossed paths in the kitchen. "Lesson plans," he said without looking up from his coffee. But it didn't look like lesson plans. It looked like a timeline, with dates and bullet points, and careful handwriting that reminded me of legal documents. "Deacon, can we talk?" "Really talk? What would you like to discuss?" His formality was worse than anger. At least anger would have shown he still cared enough to fight for us. "About us. About what happens next." "What happens next is up to you. You're the one who has to decide what you want." "I want to fix this." "Do you? Because you were at his apartment again last night. Mrs. Chen saw you leaving the building around 11. Mrs. Chen was our elderly neighbor, a sweet woman who brought us homemade cookies and always asked about our families. The thought of her knowing about my affair made me sick. "How do you know what Mrs. Chen saw?" "She mentioned it when I helped her carry groceries yesterday. She was concerned about you. Thought maybe you were working too much, looked stressed." The way he said it made me realize that Mrs. Chen wasn't the only neighbor who'd been talking to Deacon. He was gathering information, building a picture of my activities. "Are you having me watched?" "I don't need to have you watched. You're not exactly being discreet." He was right. I'd gotten careless, sloppy. The thrill of the affair had made me feel invincible, like I could have both lives without consequences. "I can end it," I said desperately. "I can stop seeing him." "Can you? Because you've been saying that for weeks, and yet here we are." Deacon finished his coffee and rinsed the mug in the sink. "I have parent conferences today. I'll be late." "On a Thursday? Some parents can only meet after work. You understand about professional obligations, don't you?" The way he said it felt like a trap, like he was testing me. "Of course." But after he left, I called the school. "Hi, this is Xanthe Lira, Deacon Lira's wife. He forgot his lunch, and I wanted to drop it off. What time do his parent conferences end today?" "Oh, Mr. Lira doesn't have any conferences scheduled today. Would you like me to transfer you to his classroom?" I hung up without answering. If Deacon wasn't at school, where was he? Who was he meeting with? That evening I confronted him. "I called the school. You didn't have parent conferences today." Deacon looked at me with something that might have been pity. "No, I didn't. I had a meeting with Dave. We're updating some legal documents." "What kind of legal documents?" "The kind that protect my interests when my marriage ends." The words hit me like a physical blow. When it ends, not if. "Xanthe, we both know this marriage is over. The only question is how it ends, amicably or in court." "I don't want a divorce." "You don't want a marriage either. You want a safety net while you explore other options." He was right, and we both knew it. I wanted Deacon's stability and Julian's passion. I wanted the security of marriage and the excitement of an affair. I wanted to have my cake and eat it too. What if I really ended it this time? What if I cut all contact with Julian? Would you, really, or would you just be more careful about hiding it? I couldn't answer that question honestly, because I wasn't sure of the answer myself. Deacon pulled an envelope from his briefcase and set it on the kitchen counter. "These are copies of everything Dave needs. Bank statements, mortgage documents, employment records. I thought you should see them before we proceed." I opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside were photocopies of our financial records, but also other things. Screenshots of my text messages with Julian, photos from social media, a timeline of my activities over the past month, with dates, times, and locations, even receipts from restaurants where Julian and I had eaten, charged to my credit card. "How did you get my text messages?" "We share a phone plan. Everything's backed up to the cloud." I felt sick. He'd been watching, documenting, building a case against me while I'd been living in a fantasy world with Julian. This looks like you're preparing for war. I'm preparing for divorce, there's a difference. Deacon, please, we can work this out. We can go to counseling. Can we? Because counseling requires honesty, and you've been lying to me for months. I started crying then, but Deacon didn't comfort me. He just watched with that same clinical detachment he'd been showing for weeks. I'm staying at Dave's tonight, he said. Tomorrow we'll discuss how to proceed. Civilly, I hope. He packed a bag and left me alone with the envelope of evidence, the weight of my choices finally crushing down on me. I called Julian, sobbing into the phone. He knows everything. He has evidence. He's filing for divorce. Then come here, tonight. Stay with me. I can't. This is really happening. My marriage is over. Good. It should be over. You deserve better than him. But as I sat in our empty apartment, surrounded by the life Deacon and I had built together, I wasn't sure what I deserved. I'd destroyed something real for something that might just be an illusion, and I had the sinking feeling that I was about to find out just how much my choices were going to cost me. The mediation office was sterile and intimidating, all glass and steel and uncomfortable chairs. Deacon sat across from me at a polished conference table, flanked by Dave and another lawyer I didn't recognize. I'd brought my own attorney, someone I'd found through a frantic Google search the night before. Before we begin, Dave said, opening a thick folder, I want to establish that my client has attempted to resolve this matter amicably. Mrs. Lira has been given multiple opportunities to address the situation voluntarily. What situation? My lawyer asked. We're here to discuss an uncontested divorce. Actually, we're here to discuss a contested divorce with grounds of adultery, Dave replied calmly. My client has substantial evidence of his wife's extramarital affair. My stomach dropped. I'd hoped we could keep this simple, divide our assets quietly, and move on with our lives. I should have known Deacon wouldn't make it that easy. Dave opened his folder and began laying out documents like he was dealing cards. Photos of Julian and me outside his apartment building. Screenshots of our text messages, including some I'd forgotten about, intimate messages that left no doubt about the nature of our relationship. Credit card receipts from expensive dinners I'd claimed were work meetings. Hotel receipts from an afternoon I'd told Deacon I was at a conference. As you can see, Dave continued, the affair has been ongoing for approximately 2 months, beginning shortly after the wedding. Mrs. Lira has used marital funds to finance her relationship with Mr. Julian Kessler, lied repeatedly to her husband about her whereabouts, and conducted her affair in a public manner that has damaged both her and my client's reputations. I felt like I was watching someone else's life fall apart. Every document, every photo, every receipt was a nail in the coffin of my marriage and my dignity. Furthermore, Dave said, pulling out another set of documents, my client has documented the emotional impact of this affair on their household. He handed over printouts of my social media posts, photos of Julian and me that I'd posted and then quickly deleted, thinking no one had seen them. Comments from friends and family expressing concern or disapproval. Screenshots of the gossip about us that had spread through our social circles. My client, a respected educator in the community, has been subjected to public humiliation and professional embarrassment as a result of his wife's actions. Several parents have approached the school administration asking about the situation, forcing my client to address personal matters in his professional environment. I wanted to disappear. I'd never thought about how this would affect Deacon at work, how his students and their parents would view him once word got out about my affair. What exactly are you asking for? My lawyer said. Full custody of any future assets acquired during the marriage, division of current assets weighted in my client's favor due to the circumstances, and a formal acknowledgement of fault in the divorce proceedings. We don't have children, I said quietly. No, but you have a home, joint savings accounts, retirement funds, and shared debts. My client contributed equally to these assets while maintaining his marital vows. Mrs. Lyra contributed equally while conducting an extramarital affair funded by marital resources. The next hour was a blur of legal jargon and numbers. Deacon sat silent while Dave talked, never meeting my eyes. In the hall, my lawyer hissed, "You're dead to rights. Hotels, dinners, gifts, thousands from joint accounts. Accept terms or lose in court and every text becomes public." Back inside, Dave offered a settlement. I keep my car and clothes. Deacon keeps the apartment, most savings, retirement, and I carry $8,000 in affair debt. Then he showed Deacon's preparation. Money moved, holdings sold, HR briefed, reputation protected. That night, Julian offered freedom, and I signed, before my courage failed at dawn.